So here we are. This is Cheche Conversations. I'm so excited to be talking with Njambi McGrath. Am I pronouncing that correctly,
Yeah,
Njambi?
yeah. Njambi McGrath, yeah.
Amazing. Acclaimed comedian, performer, author, and just I'm so excited to be here with you.
Mhm.
And we're going to be discussing Rinsing Mũkami's Soul,
Mm.
which is your debut novel. That's right?
Yeah.
Amazing. And my name is Aleya, and I write and sometimes perform and occasionally make samosas.
Yeah, amazing. But samosas. Now, yeah, I'm hooked.
Yes, yes, you have to. We must break samosa. I was going to say break bread, but break samosa.
Yeah, because like I haven't had a decent samosa for like a very long time, so I'm craving.
When you come to Nairobi, and your description of the bhajias in the novel had me like just the bhajias and then also all the different types of tea.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning.
Right.
Perhaps I'd love to hear from you what the
Mhm.
novel is about. Like, how do you describe it?
So Rinsing Mũkami's Soul is the journey of a young studious girl, Mũkami. So she's befallen hard times because her family were kicked out of where they lived. So now they live in a slum, basically. That's where they live. And she's very ambitious, very studious, and is faced with all the usual problems that we see typical of Kenya, typical of Africa. So lack of school fees, she's struggling with that, but she's very determined. She wants to become a geologist, and her path seems set, and she's very clear about where she's going with this. And of course, she falls in love with the wrong boy, and this boy is not just any old boy. He's a bad boy, and this is where we see the clash of cultures, the rape culture in Kenya, in Africa, globally, actually. And she has no control of her destiny. Like many women around the world, we don't seem to have control of our destiny. You may have goals and ideals, and yet all it takes is just one thing, and then completely derails Mũkami. So yeah, and Mũkami now she finds herself in great peril, and somehow she has to navigate her way into adulthood without seeking the help of her mom, because she doesn't want to break her mom's heart even more than is already broken.
That is such a brilliant description. Njambi, I love Mũkami so much from
Oh,
the beginning.
right.
She's just this character that you are like rooting for so hard. And this sense of like her being thrust into
Yeah.
this adult world, like it's sort of like, I guess it's a bit of a loss of innocence, like she's straddling two worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden she's entering this place where she's heard about certain things, but she doesn't know how to navigate it.
Yeah.
Um, I wondered, like you mentioned, she falls in love with a bad boy.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be open to doing a little bit of a reading? There's a passage that or I can do it if you prefer. I wanted to share. It's the Madonna passage, which I thought would give listeners, viewers, fans a little taste.
The
Um,
Madonna passage.
yeah,
Oh,
I have. Should I tell you the page?
yeah, please. I should know this.
Oh, it's chapter 3. Chapter 3.
Okay, chapter 3.
Uh, just
Uh,
so that everyone here has a little bit of a taste of what the prose is like, and then, yeah.
okay. I sense his aura before I can look up. His presence fades, the classroom noise in the background. It's been several days since we first met, and I found out he's a new boy in my class. His desk is a few rows down from mine. My eyes roll up his creaseless uniform landing on his baby face. He's masculine, yet delicate. He's pressed against my desk, and I can feel his breath on my skin. He's standing close, and I don't know whether to lean back or move in. He lifts his hand towards my face. I stare at his smooth hands and manicured nails. He's in a league of his own, possessing a finesse I've never seen before. In his hand is a picture. He studies my face, suspending my curiosity. He turns the picture round like a magician playing a trick. I stare. It is a woman whose skin is the color of the belly of a frog. Her hair is the color of dried maize. She's wearing a leather jacket and short floaty skirt. Her legs are covered in bizarre socks that don't cover her feet. What's the point of such socks? The short sleeve top she's wearing reveals her long arms weighted down by multicolored bracelets. Her low cut top, sorry, my dog is snoring just next to me. Her low cut top reveals the mounds of her breast. I've never seen anyone pose for a picture like that before. I wonder what Mama would say about this woman in the photo. The washerwomen of the Ministry of Works compound would definitely twist their lips in disdain and call her a prostitute. Her neck is decorated with bright necklaces. Her lips are the color of a cock's crown. She's smiling with one eye half closed. Confused, I guess at the picture. Am I supposed to know this woman? Then it hits me. He must suspect how I feel. He's here to warn me of his girlfriend. I'm deflated at the thought. Who? My throat croaks as if stuffed with dried earth. I pray he doesn't confirm my suspicion. Is that your girlfriend? I ask before he can respond. What's wrong with me? I'm a mess, uncultured and exposed. He laughs and slaps my desk. I'm unable to see the joke. No, this is Madonna. She's so cool, he says. His American twang detonates my logic. He sounds like the people on TV and radio. I'm thrown off guard but laugh too. It comes out wrong. We're speaking at cross purposes. I feel clumsy, yet like a shipwrecked sailor. I'm still searching for some anchor. I don't know the meaning of this. Instead of speaking about us, he's here to speak about this Madonna. How do you know her? My accent is crude. You're cute. Don't ever change. My cheeks burn. My school shirt is damp, magnifying the smell of sweat from my armpit. I'm embarrassed by not knowing what to say, by my clothes, my ugly tire shoes, the way I speak, and not knowing who the woman in the picture is. I have no clue what this conversation is about. It's not what I imagined we would talk about if we ever spoke. She's the singer of La Isla Bonita, Madonna, he says, licking his lips. I'm out of my depth. I'm foolish, unable to make a viable contribution to this conversation. I've never seen a picture of Madonna, but of course I know who she is. Besides, where would I get such a photograph from? They don't sell such things in the market. He smiles, his boyish face drawing me in. Please excuse my rudeness. I am Kimathi, he says. Kimathi is a Gikuyu name, I say, glad to move away from the conversation I know nothing about. It's not clear if he heard me, but because he says nothing, or maybe the words never left my mouth. My name is Mũkami, I say, to fill the awkward silence. He replies solemnly, Mũkami is boring. From today onwards, I'll call you Madonna. My mind buzzes. He wants to change my name to Madonna. It never occurred to me to change it. No one has ever commented on my name, let alone try to change it. People here don't change their names because they're boring. But Kimathi thinks mine is and prefers Madonna. I'm already out of my depth with him. And if he thinks it will help, then what's a name change? Who am I to resist? Nothing about him is conventional. He's so refined. I wonder, where did he come from? He's different. I'm the opposite, primitive and uncultured. Even my name. Mama says Mũkami means the intelligent young maiden who milks. But we don't have cows, so I never milked. I feel his eyes penetrating on me. And I'm about to shrug in agreement when Mr. Onacha, the history teacher, walks in and Kimathi disappears.
Thank you, Njambi.
All right.
That passage reminded me so much of like that adolescent fizziness, first time. It's such a universal feeling.
Yeah. I mean, well, who doesn't know that feeling? You know, when you meet someone and you know, you're nervous, you don't know what to say, you say the wrong thing, you know, you're just, it comes out wrong.
Yeah. And what I loved so much is like how much it felt like it was so specific, the details.
Oh yeah.
The thing about this novel that I love so much is the texture, it's so vivid, the details, it feels almost like, it feels very fully formed. And I wondered, and I wondered like, how did it come to be? Like, how did this novel, how did you birth this novel? How did it come to be?
Actually, during the lockdown, you know, we weren't going anywhere. And I was like, this is the first time in my life where you're just like sat around thinking, I can't even leave the house. What am I going to do? How am I going to spend my time? Obviously, you have a lion today and a lion tomorrow and the day after, and you're like, this is it, I'm done now. What am I going to do? And so having written through the Leopard's Gaze, I had done so much research. And I discovered that Kenya is so full and vibrant. It's got all these stories, and it doesn't matter where you live, whether you live in a slum, whether you live in a farm, there's so many rich stories. So I decided to write a book called The Residents of the Ministry of Works. And this is a compound full of just dysfunctional people. It is basically, like many places in Kenya, like if you go to many different places, you find people who just ended up there because, they lost their land during colonialism and they never regained it. And now they're forever moving around. But it doesn't take away the essence of what this community is. So this community is, they're dysfunctional, but there are people with wants and needs and demands and desires and jealousy and quirks and everything. And so that's the first book that I wrote, and I sent it to my publisher, and she said, oh, this is great. But then in the meantime, by the time she responded to me, Mũkami had been born. So she spoke to me greatly because I wanted to tell the tale of girls that I'd known. I grew up with these girls. They were ambitious, and somehow they never got to finish their education because they got derailed. And then I remember, who doesn't remember, children being sent home because of school fees. Parents, it doesn't matter which parents are always worrying about school fees. Oh, where am I going to get my school fees? My children's school fees, children's school fees. And so I wanted to tell this tale. She reminds me so much of, myself, a lot of girls that I knew when I was growing up. So it just came so organically to me. I could see this place very vividly in my mind. I could see her life very vividly in my mind. I have been in Arabia. I've been on the matatu to Isli, so I know, I know those details.
Is there anything about Mũkami that surprised you as you were writing her?
Yeah, I mean, the ending, and I'm not going to tell people about the ending. Obviously, she changes throughout the journey, but also her resilience, her courage, the fact that she's looking for solutions in her own way. She's a very determined young girl, and she is not going to let all this tragedy defeat her. She's undefeated. And so she wants to find a solution. And so I don't think this is going to be something that she cannot overcome. She will somehow overcome because it's the nature of her character. And she reminds me of so many women in Kenya, women who've gone through so much, and yet somehow they keep fighting. And because this is it, the hustle and bustle of women in Africa in general is one of, they have to keep going. It doesn't matter. There's obstacles in the way, but they get there.
Yeah. And there's this thing that you write so beautifully. There's, that really comes out about women showing up for one another in different ways, whether it's the women, fantastic, fabulous Auntie Eunice, and Bui, and, there's just, even though there's so much heartbreak, there's also so much care in the community.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the most beautiful things, because I don't know about anywhere else in the world, but it's one of the things about Kenya that I think makes it very special, is the way people show up for one another.
Yeah, this is how we cope, because if you live outside of Kenya, so if you live in Europe, if you live in like America, Australia, Canada, they have a safety net, like the government provides some sort of safety net. Like in Kenya, we don't have that safety net. So we have to find it in one another. So I remember these Kiama women, they they would go around to somebody's house and they would all contribute, and all that woman would end up. And essentially, if that woman put the 100 shillings in her bank every single month, in 6 months' time, she'll come up with the same amount of money. But there is something about these women coming, there you go, and it feels like such an achievement. And then we'll wait 6 months and then they'll come back again. And also they enjoy it. It's a social life. They come and talk about their, what's going on with them. It's good for their soul, it's good for their mind. And then they just, leave this person with their bundle of cash, and they can just do whatever they want to do. And it's great. Women just coming through for each other.
It's so wonderful. There's this thing about Mũkami that, like, she starts out, innocent, like you mentioned, studious. She has huge dreams, and a lot of stuff happens to her, and then there's a turning point. And I don't want to give spoilers. I want to try, whoever's editing this, if we do give out spoilers, just snip them out. But there's something that happens, and she just takes control in the way that she knows how. And I think there's this feeling of rage that's central, that's almost like the fulcrum. And what really struck me is, like, I think that she was able to feel and act on a rage that her mother wasn't able to.
Yeah. Because her mother, they're different people, and the different generations. And if you look at the generations in Kenya, so we have, I suppose, like the third generation now, post-independence. But the generation that came, during the time of independence were completely different people. And then their children come along, and they have a different way of looking at things. They have a different view. They don't have, I suppose, the same issues their parents had, because their parents were there fighting for independence, so that was their main goal. But now the goalposts have shifted, and now it's different trauma that these people are experiencing. And the thing is, it's actually easy to be decent when you are comfortable and you have the money. But yeah, but if you don't have the money and you have the need, what is it that drives people into crime? What is it that drives people into all sorts of things? It's not comfort and wealth and whatever. And this is why you see areas where people are affluent, they've got manners, they've got decorum, they've got etiquette, they've got all of this because they can afford it. But in areas where you have to fight for every single thing that you've got, you can't afford decorum. You can't afford any of those things. Because the pressure of just resolving whatever issue you've got will turn you into whatever you need to do in order to survive.
And
we see this in areas of deprivation.
And this idea of, like, judgment on Mũkami for stuff that she didn't even do, the judgment should be directed elsewhere, really. Is such a statement also on, like, our society and who gets to be upright. Yes.
And you know what, you see a young girl who is fallen into some sort of difficulties, and people don't even want the context or backstory. People just want to go straight, oh my God, you're shaming your family. Why are you shaming your family? Do they deserve this? It's like, you don't even know the context. You don't even know what's happened to this. You don't know how she's ended up there, anything about her, but we're just there throwing judgment. And particularly, this is, I suppose, a criticism of, Kenya. And, I've lived in Kenya and, traveled to Africa, seen that judgment, particularly harsh judgment. And I mean, it's not even Kenya, it's I guess it's around the world. If you see how rape cases, particularly, are tried, like even in the UK, when rape cases are tried, usually they will bring out issues like, this is the underwear she was wearing when she was raped, so it's her fault, and things like that. So yeah, judgment on women, and it's very harsh on women, and yet the perpetrators are the men. We should be judging the men on what they were wearing.
And what and what they did, essentially their behavior, what their actions were. That
this is it. It literally is their behavior. This woman, this girl, is in that situation because of something that a man did to her. He is the one that should be on focus, but we are very judgmental. on women. Women judge other women as much as we love each other and support each other, but we judge other women. I talk about the washerwomen and how they love to gossip.
Yes.
Those washerwomen just rolling their eyes and talking about
the dying woman and how she's maybe being kept alive by visits at night.
Yeah, and this is it. What we see is not all we get. You have characters like the dying woman, like we just again judge her, because she's always dying, and by nighttime she comes alive.
Yes, I love that so much. The characters in this novel are fantastic. All of them. They're like, I can see them and I can hear them.
Right.
Yeah, and I can see how they all like interact with one another. It just feels so alive.
Oh, wow. Thank you. These characters, they, from when I wrote Residence of the Ministry of Works, which is not published, by the way, that was the first book I was going to get published, but this one was more pertinent. So we just went with it. All these characters, just come alive. And I just feel like, and I couldn't even fit all the other characters in Mũkami's soul, because this is a story about Mũkami. And yeah, there's Firifo, don't we know a Firifo?
Yes.
The way he talks, he's born again Christian, and yeah, quite a hypocrite.
And I think the other thing that's really interesting is like you see a lot of this in newspapers and the headlines, the stories, and also like the one-liners of these people, but we so rarely get an actual real glimpse into their lives. I think that's what makes like fiction so beautiful.
Do you know what? Even people who live in the streets, if you get to their level, you will know them, their personality. There is the one who is cruel. There's one who is mean. There's one who is kind. There's one who is generous. All their personalities are still there. Their circumstances difficult and different, but their personalities are all there. And it's the same with these people, the Ministry of Works, they all have their quirks, people like Getonga, how many Getongas do we know? People you cannot trust. You look at him and this guy is going to con me,
Bad news. Yeah, immediately bad news.
Yes, he's going to con me at his earliest convenience, and, there's so many of those characters, and they are very vivid to me because I've known these characters. You just meet them and you're like, there is no way I'd ever trust this guy in any shape or form. Even shaking his hand, he might just steal my watch or something,
Yeah, and you even know how that handshake is gonna go.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, you do. Oh, you do know what that handshake is gonna be like. Yeah. So yeah, it was great fun writing this book.
I mean, there is so much humor in this novel, both in terms of the perspective of the characters, but also in the writing. And very, that very Kenyan humor of like, when things are so bad, you have to just laugh, because, I mean, how much of you being a comedian affected maybe the process or the approach of how you wrote this? Or influenced it?
I suppose, I write comedy, so I must be able to see funny things.
Right.
And there are funny things that presented themselves, like the journey in the car when when she's going to Eastleigh, she's in the car, and that's quite a serious scene, and
it's very intense.
And when I was writing it, you're like, oh, you can feel the tension, and then something happens and there's no way I could not throw in that punchline in there. And I that's what my publisher says. That's what she said. That's what hooked her, because she just howled laughing when, and I suppose my mind is the same mind. The mind that writes comedy is the same one that writes the books. So I suppose, it's gotta be that some things just present themselves and you cannot. And you know what's so funny though? Some of the things that I wrote, I didn't know it was funny until someone said, "Oh my God, that bit there is really funny." I was like, "Oh, really? Oh, great." Well, because with comedy, then you just usually take it out and you go in front of an audience and you say something and people laugh and you think, "Oh, that bit is funny." But sometimes you don't even know the content of your mind is funny until other people say, "Oh, that's funny."
And then also a novel is such a private experience when the person is reading it.
Yeah.
So you actually don't know, you don't get to know, you don't get to see what bits.
No feedback, no feedback. You just write and then you just hope that whoever reads it, first of all, is going to find it interesting or even want to read it and even want to keep reading it. So it's just such a bizarre experience when you like, because when I sat down during the lockdown and I started writing this, you don't know where the story is going to go. And you just put the then I put the manuscript together and I send it off to my publisher and I said, "Is this any good? Is it anything?" And she says, "Wow, yeah, let's lay." And then I sent Mũkami so she said, "Oh wow, this is wow." And you're like, "Really?" And she said, "Really, start to believe in yourself." It's like, you just put the contents of your mind on a paper and people appreciate it. And that's a pretty special feeling because, with other things, there are measures, for example, like you would train to, I don't know, to be a craftsperson, to paint, and you can see it, taking shape or whatever. But it's when you put all these things down and you get the review from the actual readers that you think, okay, that feels pretty special.
It's such an act of faith, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's a very long process. It takes a very long time to write a book and shape it and all of this, but ultimately I enjoy it. I like my own company. I like spending hours with these characters and immersing myself in it. I don't think you could, you're a writer yourself. I don't think you could write if you didn't really enjoy it. It's so time consuming. But I don't mind, I don't mind. I have to remind myself, get up and go for a walk or something, because I do enjoy it. It's a labor of love.
I mean, I'd love to hear what the process was like for you, the writing process, if that's something that you're open to sharing. Are you a structural writer? Do you know where the plot's gonna go, or do you kind of get on and just see what happens?
Do you know what? I am when you say, for example, you're a trainer or a teacher or something like that, you learn about different learning styles. And some people are activists, so they just want to jump in there and start doing. Other people are planners. They will plan out, lay everything out, and then start working like that. I'm an activist. I dive in there and I start writing. I don't know where this story is going. I write, and then when I'm going to sleep, I kind of think, where will Mũkami go? What will happen to Mũkami? And that's how I kind of fall asleep. And then the following day I wake up and a lot of the things surprised me. I discovered some of these things with Mũkami. And I was like, wow, who knew? Who knew this is where she was going to go? And so yeah, I'm not a planner as well. So, and then what I do is when I've got everything out, then I start to and then I go on Scribbler. Scrivener.
Yes.
Sorry, Scrivener. And I just then shape the narrative. So I think, okay, so it makes sense if she starts off in the school setting, and then it makes sense if she starts off there, because obviously she could start at any point. She could start in the middle of her problems, or she could start at the end of her problems and look back. So it's really, and that's where I start to create the narrative. And I follow the same pattern when I'm doing comedy. I will write all the jokes and then try and thread them into some kind of story.
Yeah, there's definitely something very satisfying about the way the story unfolds that feels like an echo of a comedy piece,
Oh, really?
But I'm a very structural writer, so I like, that's what I like always stands out to me. I find structure very satisfying.
Right.
So there was something about it that it was delicious.
Oh, thank you.
Though she did surprise me at the end. That I'm still thinking about
already. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It surprised me too. I didn't even know where she was going to go. And then just when I sat down and it just went there, and I was like, oh, I guess we're going there.
Yeah.
I had no idea what we were going to do, but this is what we're doing, and this is it.
And what was the revision process like, and the editing process?
Oh, this book here is my 11th draft. Yeah. Yeah, so it's a revision, and then when you start when you start to read it, and sometimes you think, so there's something missing there. So every time you do a draft, it becomes more refined. You fill in the holes, the gaps, and I guess this is how you get somewhat a complete piece. I don't even know that it's complete in my mind, so it still doesn't. It's funny though, because I could just keep going and keep going. So you just keep revising and revising and reading over it and seeing if the narrative works and whatever, and then you get to a point of thinking, okay, I've got to stop now, because rinsing too much and then you'll end up with nothing.
Okay, so let's talk about the title.
Yes.
Tell me about the title.
Rinsing Mũkami's soul. So Mũkami's soul needs to be rinsed because of where she ends up. She ends up in, doing things that, she found herself in this situation. And I just thought, this poor girl, she just needs her soul to be rinsed. It's as simple as that. I thought she needed a cleansing. The one thing that fascinates me most, I read a lot about my tribe before colonialism, because it's something that I know very little about, weirdly. And I think many people in Kenya, and I can't even speak for a lot of people, but I think young people today, they don't actually know a great deal about their tribe, their ancestors and all of that. So it's only when I was doing research for through the Leopard's gaze, then I discovered my tribe. Yes, I know my tribe and I know all of that, but I loved the richness of what the tribe was. I loved their customs. I loved their religion and how religion was so intertwined with everything we are and everything. And I don't even know where I'm going with this. What was the question?
I can't remember either, but I love where I do like where this conversation is going, because there's so many generations represented in this novel. And the question I kept coming to in my head was like, the question of like, how did we get here?
Yeah.
It felt like this novel was an answer to how did we get here?
Yeah. So I guess where I was going with all the research about the tribe and everything is that a lot of people find themselves in a situation without context. So even I found that I did not have context and explanation to my family and all of that stuff. So these people are living in this community in the Ministry of Works without context. They don't actually understand. Many people in Kenya don't understand the role of colonialism and how destabilizing it was. It eroded our tribal norms. They took away our land, which was never returned to the people. They broke their society. And so now these people are left to cope with all of that, but we don't have the context of why we're in that situation. We are in this situation because of colonialism, and people say, move on. It's like, how can we move on until things are put right? And will things ever be put right? The question of land, land still belongs to the people that did not fight for the independence, and this, a lot of people are still suffering from the effects of the the evacuations that were done and all the the trauma of the people of that generation that is handed down, you know, and also still remains. Mũkami's dad, Mũkami's father, was working for a white settler who is, you know, in the farms in the Rift Valley, and the issue today still remains of people getting cancer and all of this, but that's Mũkami's dad, you know, he gets cancer from all of that. So all these things are there, and those things are very present to this day in Kenya.
Yeah, I mean, Ivana War, I think she says silence is one of our unofficial languages. I've not said the quote properly, but there is very much a sense of like, we don't talk about these things, you know, and often the trauma is inherited, but like you said, we don't understand the context or the very, also a sense of, I don't know, in your experience, do the elders talk about their experiences?
They do. When my mother was talking about it, I wasn't open to it. This is why children are taught things at school. And I was asking myself, why were we not taught this at school? And now I understand it. I completely understand it. You know, I get it, because when you know, when the British found out that that they were going to hand over the land to the actual Kenyans, you know, that the colony was over, they don't just walk away. It's like the French. You know what the French did in some countries? They smashed up all the roads and destroyed and burned airports and homes because they don't want to give it to you because you're nothing, because they considered us to be nothing. We're still nothing. But then they never, and this is why, and I read a lot about the people who fought for the independence. I read a lot about them, and I feel so sad for them, because they fought for the country and the government refused to acknowledge them. And the reason they refused to acknowledge them, because this is the deal that was done with the government of the time. It was done that you don't want to give these people anything, because we're going to give all the people who collaborated with the British government, we're going to give them, so these are our allies, so we can keep on milking the country. But those freedom fighters are our enemies, and therefore they're terrorists and all of that, and they shall die poor, they will never benefit from all of this. It's pretty much the same as to this day. Why is it not in the curriculum? How is it that, you know, or maybe the curriculum might have changed, you know?
I don't think so.
Already. So how is it that I'm finding out about, you know, people like Kimathi, Dedan Kimathi? Of course, I had heard of his name, but I'm only finding out about him because I read books about him. You know, I read books about how the freedom fighters spent all these and how they defeated the British. How come we don't even know about it? It's not even taught in schools. Why don't we actually know that over 1 million people in Kenya were put in special villages? And in those special villages, the torture that they endured, you know, why don't we know about them? You know, parents whose mothers were raped and their fathers were castrated. What kind of life would have taken place after those events took place? And yet we just carry on as though nothing happened.
And we still see the remnants of it, right?
Of course, it's there.
I mean, the people in power, the people historically since independence, so to speak, have benefited from us not knowing.
Of course.
And so it continues.
And this collusion needs to be in this way, because like the British hid it for such a long time. And they needed the Kenyans to be able to also hide it. And therefore they're in collusion, you know, they're in cahoot, you know, you rub my back, I rub your back. We don't want these facts to come out, because if they come out, they're very embarrassing. We can no longer point fingers at people and tell them, oh, you're abusing human rights, whilst you are the king of abusing people's human rights, you know. So yeah, it's very complex.
And then also people understand that the poverty is not their fault, which is what, you know, is always said. If you're poor, it's your fault you're poor. When it isn't.
It's not. Of course it isn't, because I mean, if you look at the land allocation after independence, it was done whilst the people who fought for independence were all in detention. And so when they came back, there was no land left for them. So they faced destitution. And Gaduki is one of them. The Gaduki in the book is one of them. And he plays a much bigger role in the residence of the Ministry of Works. Hopefully that's going to be published at some point. He plays a much bigger role, and we get to see his life as a freedom fighter. And he basically lives in a slum, whilst people who collaborated and sold to their brothers are living it large. And it's such a painful history, and yet a lot of people are walking around.
There's a line that Mũkami says, I wrote it down actually, in regards to Gaduki, his soul is broken, unlike which is dormant.
Yeah.
And I think that you also hold space for grief. That is really important as well. And because that's the other thing, is like, who gets to feel?
Yeah.
And who gets to feel what? And so, yeah, thank you for holding space for that. Sorry, did you?
It wasn't, it wasn't intentional. You just, I suppose. What do you mean, holding space for grief?
Well, acknowledging it, allowing it to, articulating it, allowing it to be present, seeing it in one another, not brushing it away, saying, yes, this is something that is worth grieving.
Well, I mean, I hope at some point Kenyans are going to awake to what took place in Kenya and really grieve for it, because I did. I mean, I spent a year crying when I was researching through the Leopard's gaze, and I really felt deep trauma just, researching it. And I hope people can go through this and then understand the context of what people find themselves in Kenya. All these slums, all these places, and yet, Kenya is huge. Kenya is one family holding 10,000 acres of land, whilst even a quarter of an acre could just do so much for the country, for other people. And just to think about how the different tribes, and I haven't taken time to learn in great details about the other tribes of Kenya, and there are many, but I think we share the same ethos, that everybody was equal. Everyone was equal. Nobody went without food. We used to have a granary by the crossroads, so that anybody walking past there could just help themselves to food. And yet you see people who have so much and people who have nothing. It's just incredible.
Unnatural,
Sorry.
It's unnatural.
But it's unnatural and grotesque. And it's, so I hope that one day, Kenya, we're going to have the reckoning and really value our cultures, because our cultures are so rich. We were taught to be ashamed of ourselves. So if you see a lot of people, and it's fine, a lot of people, they have an English name, and I don't know why they don't know why they have an English name. They have an English name because their families, they're carrying heavily, and we carry on giving our children those names. And actually, the one thing that really gets to me now is that even young children in Kenya don't even speak their own languages.
And you're actually, at some point, I don't know if it's still the case, but at some point, if you spoke your mother tongue in school, you were forced to wear a sign.
Yeah, I know that. You wear is a badge of shame. And this is what colonialism was about. It was about erasing your culture. It was about erasing your names and rubbishing your religion, rubbishing everything that you are, breaking you so that you don't know who you are, where you come from, and therefore the only thing you can do is follow the British, the British culture, the British religion, the English names. What do they even mean? We don't even know what they mean. You just probably call your kid Jackson, or
Right.
people. And this is the thing. I used to call myself Kikuyu, and then I realized actually we are not Kikuyu. We are Gikuyu. That's the name only. We cannot have an ownership of our names. So these are the things that I think a lot greatly as I'm writing my books, and I want to tell those stories, those very rich stories of people in Kenya. I do.
One of the things I love so much is these little acts of resistance that show up over and over again with different people. There's an Easter egg that I was so delighted by. I can't remember, was it Kimandi's uncle that was imprisoned for spitting in the Queen's, and that was from Living Memories, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Did you have like, are there other many little stories in here that you know about that are little Easter eggs from elsewhere?
Did you know what they are? Oh God, and I can't think there are so many. Yeah. So this is Kaminda's uncle. Kaminda is Mũkami's mother's boyfriend, and they live together. He is annoying, he's irritating, and he's very pro-British. He thinks, they give us the roads, they give us the education and whatever. And then he tells this story, uncle who's part in his in the Queen Elizabeth's food and all of that stuff. So I can't even think of us, but that's one. And oh wow, yeah, there's just so much in my mind I can't even think of.
Maybe a different question to ask: what do you remember the things that you were reading that kind of influenced this novel? Any come to mind?
You know what? I spend my time reading memoirs that were written by colonizers. Okay. Because I wanted to see, because I wanted to see the logic, the mentality, and the entitlement of these people and how they spoke about us. I never really understood racism until I read these books. They basically thought that we were, we were worse than animals, and and there's nothing wrong with animals. They're beautiful and everything. They thought we were actually beneath animals, that we were just, like in Australia, they call the natives the flora and fauna. They're not real people. They're just objects. So I read a lot of memoirs written by missionaries. Some of them written in 1840s. Wow. Yeah, and they give me a window of what Kenya, the land that became Kenya, was like. It was really fascinating, and how people were, how people view their mannerisms, their behavior. I write, and what they actually did is the British always used to employ anthropologists before they colonized anyone to study the behavior of the people. And so these anthropologists, they captured the essence of the people. And there you'll find these books in all the different tribes. They've all got them. But the one I was reading about, because I was trying to understand the Gikuyu. And these anthropologists, they captured everything before they destroyed it in books. That they actually documented it. It's like, let me document everything about you before I kill you.
Gosh, there's something really cold-hearted about that.
Yeah, and I've got the books, and I read them, and then I read I read books by the things of, I'm particularly interested in the Mau Mau fights, the what they did and how they went about it. So I've got so many books I read about all of that, and how the Gikuyu, and I've written shows about this. I've done shows about this. you know, so if you watch my comedy specials, I really talk greatly about this. My Radio 4 series is really about this, so I talk about this all the time. And yeah, just so much, and everything, how everything was broken, and how they are unrepentant, you know.
I think it can be very difficult for the spirit when you are immersed in this kind of research. Very painful.
Yeah.
What do you do to take care of yourself? Like, how do you find like joy when you're in that?
But you know what though? When you are doing research, yes, you read horrific things. Because I started off reading horrific things, and then I started finding little magical things. Like I found out like how you know, just the tribal norms, the things that they did, you know, and those things were so fascinating. And especially when I always thought that the reason we have religion in Africa was because the missionaries. And then I understand, like, if you speak to different tribes in Kenya, each one of them will tell you about their God, who they worshipped and how they worshipped them and whatever. And so I became so fascinated knowing that even when we were praying, like in the church, we were saying, Gai Mwadhani,
Right.
you know, Gai Mwadhani. This is exactly what the Gikuyu people believed in those days, you know, Gai Mwadhani. And that's how they prayed in those days, years ago. It's not because of the missionaries that we pray. It's not because of the missionaries. All the missionaries did was they came and put a picture of Jesus Christ in front of us, but we were already spiritual. And there's one bit that I do about how, you know, we worshipped our God guy who is omnipresent. He's invisible to the naked eye. And, you know, he created the first man, Gikuyu, and he took him to the mountain, which is Mount Kenya, and he said, look down below, and over there, you're going to find a garden, and that is the story, you know. And yet the missionaries just came with the Bible and they told us, you know, there's a God, he's omnipresent, he's all seeing. And, you know, he created Adam, he took him to and said, look, there's a garden. But no,
like, that's familiar. Yeah. We know that story.
We know that story. We know that story. And yet we've been fooled to believe that actually we believe because they told us.
Yeah, yeah. And yet at the same time, there's so many ways, like you mentioned, that we still hold on, or these little like acts of subversion, you know, keeping God's name, guy, you know, still present to today.
Yeah. And you know, even the things that we say, you know, we say things like guide de Naguyo or something like that, you know, God is never disturbed. And then, you know, I'm reading about what that means, and I read that guy says that if he doesn't hear from you, he'll assume that all is well with you. And I'm like, wow. How amazing is this? This is just, so, you know, just finding out, like, seriously, God doesn't really even want me to pray or anything. He doesn't want me to bother him because he assumes I'm well.
I like so much going on already.
You know, what amount of self-esteem do you have to have as a God to say to people, listen, you don't need to keep bothering me with your, yeah, I'll assume you're well if I don't hear from you. So don't feel guilty. Go enjoy your Sundays in bed. You know, I'm all good, you know. And this is it. So I find all these tiny little nuggets of, you know, happiness, and also it gives me context, it gives me understanding, it gives me perspective, and I find myself just wanting to immerse myself in those days and the tribal norms, and how, you know, like people proposed and how the marriages took place, and, you know, the norms when a baby was born and what happened. And so all those things, I find them truly, truly fascinating. In another life, I probably would have been an anthropologist.
And what's so beautiful about a place like the Ministry of Works is you have all these different ways of being coming together in one.
Yeah. And you know, they represent everything. Kaduki represents the old world. You know, Firifo, he's a Christian, and he doesn't in a way that he doesn't let everybody know that he's a Christian, you know. He's always let the blood of Jesus, whatever,
Yeah.
let the, you know, you know, and you know, Getonga, you know, he's a rogue, he's a rat. You know, how many rogues and rats do we know around? You know, you'll be walking in the street, you'll slap your bottom, and you know, how many people do we know like that? So it represents all sorts of people, but in this book particularly, Mũkami is, I feel, every girl or most girls. Yeah, because we in Africa, we tend to be very fascinated by education. We are very driven, whereas I see a shift in culture, especially when you see there's a lot of kids in the West that are not really that bothered about education. When you think about how, for us, education, you'll do anything, education, you just want to be, you know, you want to achieve, you want to excel, and all of that stuff. So yeah, Mũkami captures that essence.
There's been in the last few years, really interestingly, several Kenyan novels that have come out that explore this idea of Kenyan girlhood.
Oh, really? I saw that you shared some, and I was like, oh, I must get this.
I'll send you a link, but it's like, so Dragonfly Sea by Ivana War, and it's this young girl in Pate Island, you know, kind of who comes face to face. Well, I won't give it away, but I'll send you a link. There's House of Rust. And I'm just curious, I guess there's a generation now that's really exploring girlhood. What is it that drew you to this idea?
Oh man, so much happened in my, I mean, back in that place, you know, I remember the streets of Nairobi. I remember the music and the tan boys and slapping of this, you know, twende of the matatus. So all that is so full in my mind. And I guess I felt like, you know, I wanted to capture that, you know.
And it's so interesting how Mũkami like either sees herself or wonders if she's going to be the women she sees around her.
You can see.
Yeah, and she's like, will I turn out like that, or will I turn out like that?
This is it, because the thing is, we as we grow up, we see these people. You see the most beautiful girl in a village. Next time you see her, she's pregnant, you know, and and then you can see her life. So we grow up watching this. How many people did you know when you were growing up? They said, oh, she never finished her education, she got pregnant, you know, this happened,
and that was the end of her life.
That's the end of her, you know. And then she sees this, particularly one of the women in the compound, Wajogo, and Wajogo is vulgar. She's vulgar. She's one of those women, you know, she's got many kids, and you know, she's breastfeeding and sometimes doesn't even remember to cover herself, and she just walks around, and you know, she's that kind of woman. Nobody messes with her, and she knows every gossip and whatever, and she's repulsive to Mũkami. Mũkami thinks, God, this woman is the exact reason why I need to be studying, because I cannot be like her. And I suppose just looking at that woman is like looking at a horror show and thinking, if I'm not careful, I'm gonna be her. And it's yeah.
And then I won't give spoilers, but it's beautiful what happens towards the end.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at the time and I realized that we're going to end at 9:30, but I should open up the space if anybody else has questions. And I know we have a few people in our virtual audience. If anyone has a question, feel free to either, you know, pop it into the chat. Wanja, yes, please go ahead, Wanja.
Okay, so I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to, and thank you for being so conscious about the spoilers and everything. But just as you were talking about the characters and sort of giving a sense of what happens to Mũkami, and also then talking about the whole colonial misadventure, one thing that occurred to me is that perhaps, and I don't know if you've thought about this, Njambi, as you were writing it, but it's almost as if Mũkami could be a reflection of things at a macro level, that here's this pure soul who then gets, you know, infected by this
Or
external
you can unmute yourself if you fancy.
force, this relationship that she has. It sounds like it's a relationship that then leads her down this path.
And if not, we'll just keep chatting away.
And, you know, thinking about colonialism in that way, that this sort of external force came into our system, for one. I recently did a talk about this. There's this sense that, oh, you know, families of privilege are so, everything is perfect in their world. You know, they're sort of like this pristineness, but I think colonialism affected everybody. It doesn't really matter. I mean, in different ways, but it did. The trauma is universal. And so perhaps what is not shared or spoken about because of that, you know, people can be pristine and whatever, just really hides a lot of trauma as well, whether it's from exposure, moral injury, whatever the case may be. I think that when you had a system that kicked in by force, so it's not as if people chose necessarily. There are some people who say, you know, you made a choice, not necessarily. And you had a lot of, say, chiefs who would sort of, you know, with one hand, they're working with the British, with the other, they're working with their people, supporting people, sending food to the forest or whatever. I think it's much more nuanced, and there's a collective healing to be done, you know, but one that is sort of, just as with healing any kind of relationship, there has to be a meeting of what's our shared experience in this, and how do we then mend from it, as opposed to the continuous villainizing, you know, you were on this side, you were on this side, but there was just a lot of shared agony and grief, I think, from family members being betrayed, whole communities being betrayed, you know. Any one collaborator also belonged to a community. What was the effect of that?
Yeah.
So,
I was thinking about this actually the other day when I was still doing, I have a sad life where I just read about all this stuff. I was reading about the home guard that captured that shot Kimathi, and what happened to him and the money he was paid. I think he was something like $100 or something like that. And he basically shot Kimathi, and he used that money to buy a bus, and nobody rode on that bus. People refused to ride it, and of course the British left, and he was left. So they would graffiti it, and they would graffiti Modimo wa Kimathi, which means the Modimo is the lower part of the leg, which was shot, and they would graffiti it on his bus. He sold the bus, nobody wanted to buy it, and then he opened a restaurant, nobody ate in it, and then the British left him. And this is the thing, you know. So what? And I would like to penetrate his, you know, someone like that, and want to know what went on through his mind, because you do this, you've collaborated, you've actually taken this person who was going to play a very pivotal role in liberating the country from the colonizer, who is fundamentally driven by racism. That's what it is. And it doesn't matter whether you're a collaborator or a freedom fighter, he hates you equally, but he finds value in just using you to further, because a lot of the beatings that were done during the colonial times were actually done by actual Black people. And the reason they use the Black people, to beat other Black people, is to have that permanent division.
To divide and rule.
Yeah. And this is it. So this is a tried and tested method, because there was very, very, very few colonizers, and they knew that they could use other people, and therefore showing that, I mean, it's the same in Northern Ireland. If you look at the history of Northern Ireland, it's only just the other day that they stopped bombing each other, because you have exactly the same. You have the loyalists and the Republicans, and the loyalists believe that they're British, and the Republicans, and they're always fighting each other. This is divide and rule, because when people are united, they are a danger. When people are divided, they are easy to control. And what I say is that, if I don't know if anybody here currently follows the UK politics, I say that Britain has actually colonized itself, because this is exactly what they're doing in Britain. So they have caused so much division with the Brexit, with you know, so many other different things. So they have caused so much division that is difficult. And then you have the right wing and the left wing, and, you know, the environmentalists and the, you know, trans allies, and all of this. It's a culture war. And so they have all these people fighting against each other, because if they're united, they will destroy them. And so what happened in Kenya is not unique, and they've been doing it to so many different places for so long. But what you say, Wanja, is that, and actually I think we chatted a little bit on this point when I was in Nairobi, that none of us, not you, not I, would know what to do if we were in that situation. When those people who are in that situation, they probably thought, I'm just gonna get along. I just want to survive. I just want to look after my children. So I'm just gonna do what the British want. And there are other people who found it unacceptable, and they were like, I cannot do this. For whatever reason, people just chose sides, you know? And those of you who have read my Through the Leopard's Gaze, you would know, like my grandmother, she just wanted to look after her children, you know? And so you just don't know. But the conversation is not being had, and the reason it's not being had is because of its suppression of information. This information is completely suppressed for a reason, because the moment this starts getting taught in schools, people will get very angry when they discover that the British had over 1 million people in concentration camps. They will get very angry when they find out what happened to the people in those concentration camps. Even my own mother, when she used to talk to me, she used to say, you know, when we were in Mehari, I didn't even know what Mehari was. I just thought it was the name of a place like Muthaiga or whatever. I didn't understand what it was until in her dying year, she told me what that was, and I, in conjunction with my research, and I was horrified. It's horrific, and you can see why these governments work very, very hard to suppress the consciousness of people in Kenya, because it's very different from other countries. It's even different than South Africa. It's even different than Ghana or even Nigeria, in that they actually had concentration camps in Kenya with the ultimate goal of wiping out the whole entire tribe of the Gikuyu, the Meru, the Kambas, and you know that was the intention, to wipe them all out, you know. And this is it. That's why.
Yeah, you see even you know, those vitambas on sofas, you know, the crochet, you know, on sofas and on televisions and like tables. And, you know, from what I understand, you know, the British in the concentration camps tried to civilize the women by making them crochet.
Yeah.
And if you refused, it was really horrific, the things that were done to you. And so you put the crochet so that you could survive.
Yeah.
But that's really, really horrific part of history that stays present. And yet, you know, a lot of us don't know.
And you know what? And it's not even just Kenya. You see places like, you know, Rwanda, you know, you see places like the Congo, you know, the chopping of their hands, you know, they still do that. You know, the rebels will go and chop people's hands and stuff like that. This was done to them by King Leopard. you know, it's all these things still manifest. And I hope that we can start to have this discussion. And I hope that, I mean, I don't think this is going to come from the government, from the current government, that they start bringing the nation into consciousness, because I don't know, by the way, I don't know anything about the current government. I don't know, but I just...
It's a bit, the current government is a bit like Firifo. Let's put it that way. The people who are doing this work, and they are actually doing this work, are the storytellers and the artists. And I think what's really encouraging is there are a lot of young people who are hungry and seeking and, you know, certain that there's things that there's a lot that's being kept from them that they need to know. And so definitely, and I guess the internet helps with that. This fiction helps with that. Non-fiction helps with that, because previously, how did you have access to any of this?
No, it would have been pretty difficult. And I say, like, because I was, even as a child, I was always a bookworm. And the thing that I found that I lacked most as a child was books. Because, you know, somebody would have a book and you'd be waiting for it. And, you know, and in those days, in the variety of books, and I realize right now that the books that we were reading were just all, again, propaganda, you know, Mills and Boon and all of that stuff, Barbara Cartland. Why were we reading Barbara Cartland? Why were those the only books that were available for us to be reading? You know, why weren't we all reading Ngoge wa Thiong'o? Why weren't we all reading you know, Facing Mount Kenya? Because Facing Mount Kenya is the essence of what the tribe was before it was destroyed, you know. So many books, and you know what though, I found that when I was last time in Nairobi, I was I went to bookshops. There's a message here.
I think it's a question.
Yeah, okay. I heard you speak of the colonial nature of modern religions replacing norms that had existed for thousands of years. African beliefs before colonization had found a way to optimize society for Africans, religion or social norms, and even science as it is, as if everything was discarded to accommodate Westerners. Can the same be said about science? Hundreds and hundreds of years of knowledge wiped out. Oh my God, so true. My God. I am so fascinated by the tribe, and when I say the tribe is because there's so many in Africa, but I concentrate on the actual Gikuyu because that's, you know, where I started when I was doing my research. Looking at how childbirth took place, looking at how they dealt with placentas, you know, as they stopped hemorrhaging, how the way they put mothers on a special diet to stop them from hemorrhaging and all of this stuff. And then I found out that even in Uganda, before 1800s, they used to perform C-sections, you know. They used to anesthetize people using palm wine and cauterize bleeding using hot rods and stuff like that. I actually saw a video that was filmed at the start, early 1900s. I think he was a Luo man having brain surgery, live brain surgery. I have seen it. I watched it and I was like, of course, it was that it existed. The thing about colonialism that people, I suppose, colonialism is what it is. You go over to a country, you conquer the people, you wipe out their narrative, you wipe out their culture, you enforce your culture on them because you're supremacist. You believe that your culture is superior. And anything like even there's a conversation now about what happened in Benin. You know, when the British soldiers turned up in 1897, what did? They burnt down the palace and they looted everything because they wanted to wipe out any sign of any form of civilization. So somebody entered me because they know entered me into a WhatsApp group where we are taught how to write in ancient Gikuyu. I don't know if you even know that there's a writing, how people used to write the ancient Gikuyu. And this guy teaches how like we used to write, and it was basically the same as hieroglyphics. We used hieroglyphics, and yet this stuff we don't even know that we had our own style of writing. You know, we had our own style of letters, posting letters and messages and giving messages and all of this. But all of this has been completely wiped out. It's not documented. You know, we had our orators, people going around with a geshade and all of this, but it's all been completely wiped out. And I just sometimes feel like I just want to scream to people in Kenya, please ask your grandparents quickly before they die. Ask all of them, because we need this stuff. It is so valuable. And I've been doing some research. There's a guy that I speak to. He's 100. And I mean, he's getting quite tired now, but I've been speaking to him very regularly because he was telling me about, I mean, he's a distant relative, and he was telling me about our distant relative who was a Mudhamaki. Mudhamaki was, you know, the name for, you know, the leader, king, whatever. And she had 7 wives. And this is the other thing that we don't talk about, women that married women and all of this stuff. And I'm completely fascinated by this. And these are all the things that we should be learning about, because we have very rich cultures. And it's, yeah, it's out there for us. Only we Chinua Achebe said, if you don't like the narrative, write your own. Nobody's going to write our narrative, only we can.
And that is just the absolute perfect place to stop this evening. And that call, Njambi, that you said, talk to your grandparents, ask them, write it down. You're right, it's so important, because we're losing the elders.
Yeah.
And then we lose the memory, and we lose our ways.
That's right. And the thing is, because like even in Kenya, I suppose, you know, people were so happy to escape colonialism that they forgot to capture what was lost. Because like, if you look at other countries, they really value all that knowledge. People write about it. Like, you will find stuff that was written from, you know, 1200 and stuff, you know, all of this. But Africans, somehow we think, oh, we're modern, you know, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. And we think modernity is forgetting who you are. And and I hope that we can find we can just wake up, basically.
Thank you for this beautiful, beautiful book, Njambi. It was so wonderful to read, and I can't wait to get my hands on a physical copy. I hope, Cheche, you'll be stocking it soon. And I'm so excited to read The Ministry of Works. No, is that what the next one is called, hopefully, when it's published?
I don't know, you know, but when I do go back, because I'm going back to rewrite the draft, I don't know whether that's going to end up being the name, but at the time when I was writing it, I thought, I'll just call it The Residence of the Ministry of Works. And but I like it, you know. I like that title, and hopefully, you know, there'll be a physical book, and you can see. But thank you, guys, and yeah, please, the books are out there. That's what it looks like.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. It's a hardcover, and so I think Tiffany and Jacaranda will organize you know, for you to get physical copies that you can get. And also, don't forget that if you want the books, we can just send them to you, you know. But Cheche Books hopefully will be stocking them, and then you can just get them from them, you know, because it's nice, always nice to get into the bookshop and physically get. And by the way, thank you so much, Cheche Books, for just for spotlighting African writers, because I went around Nairobi walking into bookshops and asking them, where's the African writers? And they would say, oh, there's a shelf in the back, and that's where they are. And at the front is all the people like David Williams. It's like, what?
Why?
Why? Like, what value is it bringing to the people of Kenya? Yeah, anyway, but thank you so much, Cheche Books. Yeah,
and we can't wait to have you in Nairobi, Njambi. Whenever you come down, to have a live conversation so that you can also feel the love from all your fans in Nairobi.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, it was so nice chatting to you, Aleya, and it's so great. You know, I love doing this, and I love talking to people of Kenya, because this is home. You know, it's yeah. I hope I'll be back soon. I don't know when, but I hope I'll be back soon.
So, and congratulations on this beautiful novel. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for giving me the space.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.